And our top story tonight coming from the United Kingdom, where a major cabinet reshuffle has been dominating headlines. It was no ordinary Monday at 10 Downing Street, with the UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak sacking the Home Secretary Suella Braverman. The Indian origin cabinet member was regarded as Sunak's most visible minister, and there was growing pressure on the Prime Minister to fire Braverman after she criticised the police's handling of pro-Palestinian marches in London, and he ultimately had to let her go. James Cleverly has been appointed as the new Home Secretary. Former Prime Minister David Cameron was appointed the Foreign Secretary, and getting in James Cleverly from the Foreign Office to the Home Office and replacing Suella Braverman with him could be a sign that Sunak wants some moderation, given the fact that Braverman has been known for her rather controversial statements when it comes to issues like migrants, issues related to protesters and others. And after she was sacked, by the way, Braverman issued a statement as well, saying that it had been the greatest privilege of her life to serve as the Home Secretary, but added that she will have more to say in due course. The Housing Minister, Rachel Maclean, has also been sacked. Teresa Coffey has left her role as the Environment Secretary. The long-time Schools Minister, Nick Gibb, has also left the government. Now, the question is, will this reshuffle help the Conservatives? After all, Rishi Sunak has tried to reset his premiership through this move and gain electoral momentum. But will that actually happen? Will the Conservatives be able to unite in time ahead of the general election is the question. Now, earlier this year itself, the Tories had a major setback, losing over 1,000 seats in the local elections. After the Conservatives' double by-election defeat to Labour last month, there has been discontentment within. In fact, many Tory figures have been saying Rishi Sunak has not been quote-unquote bold enough since taking over. And when it comes to Sunak's performance, he has left a lot to be desired, especially when it comes to his major promises of halving inflation, reducing national debt and others. The Tories are under mounting pressure. The Labour has been on the rise. 13 years of a Tory government has meant anti-incumbency is a major factor. And there isn't a lot of time for Sunak to pacify the voters on multiple fronts. So will this cabinet reshuffle work its magic? To discuss this and more, with me on the broadcast is a very special guest, Mike Buckley, with me. Thanks very much for being here. Let me begin by asking you for your assessment of this major reshuffle. Will this actually help the Conservatives in the ways that Rishi Sunak hopes that it will, or will it be too soon to actually tell whether or not Rishi Sunak will be able to pacify the voters? Because let's face it, there are major issues hanging in the air when it comes to inflation, when it comes to the economic crisis.
I think you're right to ask that question. I think the bigger issue than who is around the cabinet table is the government delivering results to make people's lives better by improving wages or bringing down the cost of living or reducing inflation or reducing mortgage costs or anything of that nature. But I think that today will not do Rishi Sunak any harm, even though I'm not convinced it will do him that much good. I don't think he had any choice but to get rid of Suella Braverman. And indeed, getting rid of Teresa Coffey and the Education Minister you mentioned as well, particularly Coffey and Braverman, and especially Braverman. She was just seen as an extremist by now. And the fact that she's been as outspoken that she has, and has seemed, to be a far-right ideologue in the way that she has, and has indeed criticised the police and been so outspoken, over Palestinian refugees and over small boats and migrants. She has become the story far too often, and I think has become, has really brought his government into disrepute. And I think lots of people today will be thinking he really should have done this a number of weeks or months ago, and will indeed be questioning why he made her Home Secretary after she'd so recently been sacked by Liz Truss last year. All of this makes him look quite unwise. I think putting in James Cleverly into Home Secretary is a very good move for him, because he is obviously a much more sensible person than Suella Braverman was. Bringing David Cameron back, was something of a surprise, but won't do Sunak any harm, because obviously he knows how government works. he was popular enough in the last decade to win 2 elections. So while he is seen as a figure of the past, he will bring some needed experience and, possibly with some gravitas around the cabinet table. So I'd be surprised if it made much difference. But I think Sunak is on a much stronger footing now than he was yesterday because of the changes that he's made.
Well, let's also, apart from the fact that this reshuffle will have implications ahead of the general election, and will the Conservatives be able to actually unite in time for that election, and given all of these changes happening? But let's also talk about how there is a need within the camp to get its house in order. There has been growing discontentment within, especially when it comes to the Tory backbenchers.
I think today, so far, the right wing of the party around Suella Braverman, they haven't been able to respond in a particularly strong manner against this. And I think in a way they can't, because Suella Braverman has been so, objectionable to the vast majority of the public. And indeed on so many issues, as I mentioned in the last few days, and indeed the last few weeks and months as well. So I think there's a lot of people who would perhaps have supported Suella Braverman at this point will just think actually she did go too far, so it was inevitable that she had to go. However, as you said, she is going to make a statement. She clearly wants to be Conservative Party leader. I don't think this is the last that we've seen of her, much as I would personally like that to be the case. And I think the question now is, can the Conservative Party, A, come together around Rishi Sunak, or will they want to stay as divided as they have been in the last few weeks and as divided as they were at their party conference as well? And I think that will dictate in a way how bad the next election result, is for them, even though I don't think they've really got any chance of winning next time. I think now the question is, how badly do they lose? But that question indeed is one that needs to be put to Conservative backbenchers as well. For them, this may concentrate their minds on just thinking, well, this may be a way for me to save my job rather than lose my job. Right. But some of them are so ideological now that they will unite around Braverman. So I think it's an open question. But for the moment, actually, the right of his party have been quite silent today, I think.
Right, Mark Buckley, thanks very much for being here on the broadcast. Thank you.
Thank you.
And speaking of Suella Braverman, she had a 1-year stint as Home Secretary and faced political turmoil that preceded her appointment, of course. Here's a closer look at the political life of Suella Braverman.
Suella Braverman has been sacked as UK's Home Secretary yet again. The Conservative Party lawmaker is known for courting controversy, but with ambitions of taking the top job at the 10 Downing Street, Braverman can ill afford to be in the eye of the storm so often. Doing so, she has already lost the Home Secretary job twice. Having to step down from the post in October 2022 for violating the rules by sending an official document from her personal email. That was during the 45-day rule of former Prime Minister Liz Truss. 6 days later, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak brought her back, but only to sack her from something far more controversial 1 year later. In fact, in her second term, Braverman ruffled more feathers than any other predecessor, taking on hot-button issues as varied as the supposed bias of police to homelessness, sexual abuse and tofu eating were karate. But her stance on the Met Police's handling of pro-Palestinian rallies proved to be the last nail in the coffin. Not that her take on migrants and the Rwanda plan invited any less criticism. Braverman has championed a plan to send asylum seekers to Rwanda, claiming it will curb illegal migration to the United Kingdom. When the first flight carrying migrants to Rwanda was grounded by the European Court of Human Rights, she said the decision was unacceptable.
They will not stop coming here until the world knows that if you enter Britain illegally, you will be detained and swiftly removed. Removed back to your country if it's safe, or to a safe country, a safe third country like Rwanda. And that is precisely what this bill will do. That is how we will stop the boats.
Braverman's ambitions to be the next Tory leader are only too well known. She was voted out of the 2022 contest to replace Boris Johnson, but still has a strong support on the right of the party. Earlier, she worked as a junior Brexit minister, but quit in protest of Theresa May's EU deal. A qualified barrister, Braverman was made Attorney General by Boris Johnson in 2020. The Indian origin lawmaker was born Sue Ellen Fernandez in Harrow. She was the only child of Christy Fernandez, a Kenyan of Christian Goan origin, and Uma Fernandez, a Mauritian of Indian origin. Her parents came to the United Kingdom in the 1960s. Braverman was first elected to Parliament in 2015. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
WION now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the updates on the move.